Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's markup of H.Res. 252, a resolution that would affirm the Armenian Genocide in the United States record, I know is a sincere effort by the leadership of this committee and many members of this committee to mark a dark chapter in history. And let me say, without ambiguity, and with a heavy heart for the families that would be looking in and who join us today, I believe a genocide was committed against the Armenian people in the early part of the last century. And it should never be forgotten. The Bible tells me as a Christian to mourn with those who mourn and grieve with those who grieve. And so we do today in recognizing that fact. And the families and the loved ones of victims of those terrible events that began more than 90 years ago have my heartfelt condolences. I do not minimize or deny the horror of what took place, neither do I accept the contention that those who were lost were collateral damage. The fact that more than 1 million Christians were killed makes the loss even more personal to me. In recent times, U.S. presidents have annually remembered the Armenian Genocide. President Obama noted last April that it was, quote, one of the great atrocities of the 20th century, and I associate myself with those comments. And while we should never forget this genocide and the lives that were lost, and the lives that are still marred to this day, I sadly cannot support this resolution. The old book also tells us that there's a time for every purpose under heaven. And I would submit with great humility that now is not the time for this committee or the American Congress to take up the measure that is before us. As you are aware, Mr. Chairman, more well aware than I am from your experience, as the ranking member has said, Turkey is a strategic partner in our ongoing efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan. They share our interest in defeating international terrorism and seeing secure and free nations emerge after many years of war. Currently, Turkey has more than 1,700 troops in Afghanistan, and their efforts certainly have been noticed by al-Qaeda. Last month, Osama bin Laden's chief lieutenant, Ayman al-Zawahiri, specifically cited the role of Turkey's forces operating in Afghanistan as being a problem for al-Qaeda. The basing and logistical support that Turkey also provides is quite simply vital to our efforts in the Middle East. Incirlik Air Base, for example, has been a staple of American power projection for decades. For the continued use of Incirlik Base, our lease must be renewed with the Turkish Parliament on an annual basis. For our continued partnership with Turkey and Afghanistan, our relationship must also be renewed and respected. I believe we should not, at a time of war, take that relationship in any means for granted. Mr. Chairman, given the fact that American troops are at this very hour in harm's way in Iraq and Afghanistan, where they depend on supply routes available through this important relationship that we enjoy with the nation and with the people of Turkey, I believe it would be unwise for the United States Congress to choose this moment to speak on this undeniable dark chapter of human history. Before the committee took up the last resolution in 2007, we heard from every living former Secretary of State and Defense, each of whom stated that this resolution would be unwise during a time of war in our nation's history. And I associated myself with that position then, and I do so today. We must proceed in a manner that is compassionate toward those Armenian families who were affected by this genocide so many years ago, but we must also remember the families of those who serve in harm's way on behalf of our nation and on behalf of freedom in the war on terror today. And so I rise today in respectful opposition to this resolution, but I do so with deep respect for those on this committee and those that would be looking on, that would have the American people be heard on this point. While I cannot support this resolution, let them at least know that this American identifies with their loss, acknowledges those tragic events of so many years ago, and offers my condolences to the families who still bear the burden of what was, in fact, a genocide. I urge my colleagues to oppose this resolution and yield back the balance of my time.